We're going to draw and paint a line while we talk about the important basics of sketching. First, we're going to draw the basic outline of a lime wedge using our pencil. My favorite pencil is a 5H because it's a hard enough pencil to not leave a lot of soft residue, but still a nice pencil for a sharp, clean, really faint line. As we sketch out our lime wedge, you're going to make sure to not be pressing too hard to create a groove in the paper. We just want a really, really light reference that we can look at as we paint. Now we're going to draw the outside edge of the lime, where kind of the rind is. We're going to show a little bit of that difference between the flesh of the lime and the peel. Here we're going to draw the little lines that will be the segments inside of our lime. I feel like 5-ish is usually a good number, but really you can draw as many as you think fit and look appropriate in the size of your lime wedge, and they all don't have to be the same size either. Next, we're going to go in between our segments and draw some little teardrop shapes for our seeds. Again, the number of seeds is not important, just draw a few to give it a little bit of visual depth. Now for the scary part. You're going to take your eraser and you're going to erase your entire drawing. Obviously, you don't want to erase everything, but you want to get it as faint as possible. Any pencil lines that are left on your paper can possibly shine through your watercolors. So you want to make sure you erase really well, but leave just enough for you to be able to see your drawing. And make sure to remove any eraser dust. Scary part is over and we're on to the fun part. We're going to take our Hooker's Green Dark mixed with a little bit of sap green and some yellow, and we're going to mix up a bright, beautiful lime for the flesh of our lime. There is no specific recipe for most of these color mixes, especially when it comes to fun things you want to paint. You just mix until it feels right with the vision that you have in your head of how you want your lime or your illustration to look. Here is where I realized that I forgot to round out the edges of our lime segments, which would look really, really weird when you paint them without having that little bit of white space. So I'm going to go in and draw those little curved edges, and then I will go in with my eraser, erase everything again, make sure I don't over erase things that have already been erased, but erase enough to remove my new pencil marks. Going in with our green, we're going to start painting those little segments. I prefer to start with one individual segment at a time, and that way I can really control the amount of pigment and water on my brush, how it sits on the paper, how it's drying, and kind of go in and be able to really make it exactly how I want it to look. Make sure as you move into the next segments that you leave a little bit of white space where you can. Don't leave so much so that your lime is not connected, but just enough to give it a little bit of breathing room. The white will really make your illustrations pop once your paint is dry, and it will give it so much more of a professionally illustrated vibe. As you can see, by using the size 2 paintbrush that I love, you can really get into those tiny pieces like between the seeds and the rounded edges, and you actually almost feel more like you're coloring than painting. This should help your painting feel a little bit more natural and help you feel more comfortable behind the brush, which will then impact the way that you're able to paint because you'll feel better about your abilities. You absolutely do not have to do each segment in one fell swoop. It's not all about getting a wash all over the whole thing. Take your time, add in dots of extra color like I'm doing here to give some shadows, catch things before they're dry. If they are already dry, add some water and some pigment back in there to reactivate it. And really just enjoy the whimsy of painting your lime. As you're painting, just remember to stay inside your reference drawing and leave a little white space wherever you can. It's not super important or essential that you have white space everywhere, but every once in a while, if you can leave a little spot that you might have missed or leave a little space around the edges between 2 of your little lime segments, it'll just really give it a good look in the end. It's okay to miss some spots. As you're painting, make sure to go back to other areas before they dry to drop in some extra paint for some shadows and shading, give it a little bit more depth, a little bit more life, and kind of fill in some of those spaces. This is also the time that you could correct anything that you don't like as you're going through your project. It's a lot easier to fix things while your watercolor is wet than it is when it dries. Once it dries, you kind of just have to paint over it. There's really not much you can do, but while it's wet, you could either expand out your shape or pick it up with a paper towel or add a little bit more water to it to kind of manipulate the color just a little bit. If you're not liking the particular shade of lime that you've created, you could always go in with some additional green or some yellow, really add even more dimension to your lime. But really all you should be doing as you paint is enjoying yourself. Really use it as a moving meditation to keep yourself grounded in the moment and really find that joy in being who you are and what you're doing at this very moment. Once you're happy with the flesh of your lime, make sure you let it dry so that we can move on to the next part and you're not adding any other color onto your currently wet paint. Now we're going to mix some yellow into our original fleshy lime color, and I'm going to add quite a bit of water to this to make it a light wash and even move a little bit off to the side so that I'm not using as much pigment. So we create kind of a creamy yellow color to fill in the seeds. The thing with watercolor is white is actually the lack of anything. We're not using white pigment or white paint. We're relying on the white of the paper to shine through. So if you don't paint those seeds a color, they just kind of won't show up as being there. Plus, nothing is really completely white or transparent. Everything has a little bit of an undertone to it. So you want to give it a little something, something. Sticking with our same cream color, we're going to go in and paint those little triangles that we added to separate the flesh of our lime from the skin of the lime. We'll finish up with our cream color and then we will let it dry before the next part. Now we get to mix up some colors again to create the darker green of the lime rind. Starting off with our Hooker's Green Deep, I'm going to add a little bit more yellow in because it's going too blue for my personal taste. And then we're going to go in with a little bit of sap green to kind of bring that blue back in just a little bit, but keep it pretty green. And really this all depends on your personal preferences and what you're using this for. I kind of like a more dark green to separate out from the flesh of the lime, but if you prefer a more yellow green or pale green lime, you could do that too. I'm going to go in with some red because it is green's complementary color, which means it's going to dull it out and kind of create more of a browny color. And I'm doing this not because I wanted it to be this brown dead avocado color, but because I wanted to make it darker without making it more blue. Now I'm bringing that Hooker's Green Dark back in to kind of pump up that green just a little bit, but keeping it more of that dark kind of avocado shade. So we're going to pull in the yellow to brighten it back up and bring it to more of a lime. And just a little bit more sap green to bump that green up just a little bit more. And really I'm kind of just going back and forth between the two greens, balancing out that blue and yellow to create kind of that saturated lime green that I'm wanting without being the same color of the flesh or getting into that avocado color. And can you just go straight from the palette or get a palette with 157 colors that already has a shade of green in it? Yes, but it's just not nearly as fun. You could swatch your color on the paper as you go to see if you're headed in the right direction, but I'm going to swatch on my palette here. And I think we need more of a vibrant blue, so we're going to bring in the cerulean to get just a little bit more blue that's bright and not quite so dark. This is looking good, so I think I'm going to start painting. And then I'm going to start on the left side here and paint just that little bit of an edge. And here I'm realizing that is not the color that I really wanted it to be. So I'm going to go in with a little bit of water and my paper towel and dab that back up. And since we're going to paint over it, it's totally fine. But I'm going to add a little bit of clean water for that edge. Clean that up. That is the easiest way to clean up a watercolor mistake. And then I'm going to add a little bit more green in and brighten it just a little bit before going back in and ultimately finishing the edge of this lime. If you were to paint the edge before the rest of your lime was dry, it would bleed one of the colors into the other. You could get some blooms or some different little areas, especially since we have the little cream spots to separate out the flesh from the rind. It's just a lot cleaner to let your piece dry first in between switching colors if you don't want anything to bleed. When it comes to florals, bleeds can be really cool because a lot of times you do have the green of the stem going into the petals or something like that. But for this particular drawing, I wanted to make sure to keep them very, very separated. Fix any little parts of this final outline that you'd like to adjust, and then you are done. Your sketched and painted lime is complete and you're ready to move on to your next project. Great job.